clothes on. It's like hot here, really 100 degrees out.
Welcome to
my fancy t-shirt.
Welcome to the online study group for the Bhagavad Gita. We have the Peanut Gallery present right live on the video with Jim and Yash. And my name is Avital. I'll start us off with a chant, and then we can do a little meditation. In this meditation, thinking about emptying yourself out. You know, the thoughts are objects, and the more things that we have in the way, the harder it is for God to come in to us, to direct us, and to give us the wisdom and to send our life in new directions. And this chant is, "Who is in my temple? Who is in my temple? All the doors do open themselves, all the lights do light themselves. Darkness, like a dark bird, flies away, oh, flies away." It just takes me a moment to pick up this heavy harmonium and change the sound settings slightly.
That's okay. The Peanut Gallery can wait.
Okay, good.
All right, we made it. Sit up nice and tall. Palms turned upwards. Creating a silent prayer.
To God, asking Him to open Himself up and reveal Himself to you. Heart is open, shoulders relaxed, eyes gazing slightly upwards under closed eyelids. Breathing nice and smooth and fluid, powerfully through the spine. With each breath, let that catch each thought and help dispel it from your mind and from your being. Slowly open your eyes. So, Jim, I can unmute you. Maybe you have something to say about the homework.
Did you want to repeat it for the benefit of our listening audience?
Yes. Well, what I would like to say is that we talked a bit about the idea of moderation. And moderation means doing everything you can do to advance spiritually without pushing yourself too far. So the question was really to think about that during the week, although we had 2 weeks, I think, and not just, choosing things that help you advance spiritually in the way you feel it advances you, but in every moment to think about bringing in the presence of God, and that if we set that intention, that it's not as much about what we do, but how we do everything that we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the part about bringing God into every moment reminds me of a book I read many, 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 many years ago about a Russian pilgrim in the 19th century. And the name of the book is called The Way of a Pilgrim. And actually, it's not that well known, but it's, for those who know it, it's a classic. Mm-hmm. And basically, to make a long story short, it's all about a Russian peasant who traveled all throughout Russia in the 1800s, and he was a Christian, and he practiced what was known as the Jesus Prayer, which went, and it's very much like a mantra or a japa, mm-hmm. and it basically goes, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. And so he kept repeating this to himself. He actually learned it from a priest, and once he learned it, he practiced it every single moment of every single day for who knows how long. I mean, for basically the rest of his life, actually. Mm-hmm. But it took him about 2 or 3 weeks before he started to notice a distinct difference in being able to recognize the presence of God no matter what he was doing. So mm-hmm. if he was working out in the fields, he would still have this sort of like the observer-witness attitude, where on the one side he could be practicing, he could feel the presence of God, and yet he was doing his work. And so whenever I hear the words every moment, I think of him, or I think of mm-hmm. people who are doing japa, I think of people who are doing mantras, because that's the only way that it's been I can even halfway relate to that in every moment, because that's the only time that I've ever had success, is if I was doing a mantra or japa or something along those lines. Let's say I was working.
So what did you do during the last week? Maybe you can just sum that up briefly, or the last 2 weeks, that helped you feel this sense, besides just being reminded of someone else.
Well, see, that is it. I mean, it was basically I was distracted more than usual these last 2 weeks, and so this is what came back to me during those times when I did remember that I felt that I was missing something. Mm-hmm. And so those little stories that I've got there in the back of my mind, they seem to come forward during those type of times. So, and especially, like I said, with the last 2 weeks when it was more hectic than usual, the times that I caught myself were the times that I remembered, the way of a pilgrim, or mm-hmm. I've got many other stories of many people I've met along the path who keep bringing me back to this theme of japa or mantra, or it's basically a way to recollect the presence of God while you're whatever, as long as if your mind is occupied, there's still a part mm-hmm. that can practice the presence and can feel the peace, can feel the silence, can feel the it's like the eye of the hurricane. You're just all over the place outwardly, but yet inwardly you can feel the stillness, you can feel the silence, you can feel the calm. So it's like being in the eye of a hurricane, where the outer you're doing all that, and
Mhm.
so in a way that was sort of a good last couple weeks that I was so off my schedule, so to speak, because it did enable
Right.
me to sort of remember the homework assignment and to bring it back to
Yes, it
that whole thing.
forced you to
Yeah,
remember it. Yeah,
exactly.
very good. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I notice one of the things is that it gets easier with practice and more natural, because for a long time during one of my jobs, I just felt like I wasn't really remembering or feeling God's presence and the sense of devotion and love in my heart. And another job, it was no problem. It was just all flowing through me so easily. And so it just over the years kept asking for that, and I feel like that's come in more and more easily over the last month, whether I've been running around doing certain things, or if I've been doing mundane things. There's a part of yourself that you keep inside, and then if you go from inside to out, when you're communicating with other people, you can find that space within you that feels godlike and share that. And if you don't go too fast, if you can, it's like if you realize you don't need to be stressed. Stress blocks us from feeling God. And we just have to keep going. We can ask ourselves, what's the worst case scenario if this doesn't go the way we want it to? And it's usually not that big of a deal. So from there we can learn to let go a little bit. Yeah.
You just
Yash, did you want to add any comments about that?
Well, it's interesting. The word that really stuck out for me, that my mind latched onto, was moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I struggle sometimes with trying to find the right balance between spiritual life and everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be able to just go in a cave and meditate all day long.
Mm-hmm.
But for one thing, I have a family, and also I feel that some of the things I do in my community are really important. But it's hard to know sometimes how to find that balance, and particularly with more subtle elements. A lot of times I do manage to balance my schedule and can only squeak in so much time for meditation. But how much of my thoughts, how much of my conversation is, particularly when I'm around other people, is around spiritual life, and to what degree am I really listening to others? Because you don't want to be pushing your belief systems on anybody else. I think that's counterproductive. And I think for those of us who are really are really enthusiastic about our spiritual life, that can be a challenge, not to want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People are maybe not interested.
No, I know. You know what I noticed? Just a thought to throw out there. You can experiment with this and see how it works for you over time. But much of my time at Ananda Village, I really spent alone, not having much of a life. And, and I do this traveling and teaching, and sometimes I can hit the mark with somebody that I meet or I'm staying with or teaching, and I could go into the depth that I'm working with right now that's present with where I am. Not always, but what I realize is that the more firm I am in my spiritual path, the greater my understanding gets to be, and my confidence in what I've put together. I don't necessarily need others to share it with as much, because often everything that we speak is really us just trying to figure that out some more. When we connect with others, it's like verbalizing the thought process, and so I just say that to give you a little bit of that hope, but also that understanding to just keep going within and settling all those questions within you, and that over time that can give you the same satisfaction as sharing it with others. But remember too, also, not to separate the meditation cave from the family life. And, sitting still and thinking about God should be the same thing as moving about your day and thinking about God, because God is in everything, in all these people and all these actions.
Yeah, and that's really the thing, is to keep your mind on spirit all the time, even though you may be doing other things, you may be talking about other things. And one of the ways that I've been trying to do that since going on this meditation retreat a few weeks ago is making every act a sacred ritual, which is really an inward thing. People don't need to know that that's what it is for you. You can be doing something with somebody else and be totally engaged with them, even though inwardly for you, it's it's part of your sadhana.
Mm-hmm.
I have sort of a good example of that, I think, too, that when Avital was talking about, being hectic and that's try to keep your mind on God, I remember one day when I was at the Expanding Light, when I was in the Karma Yoga program, I was on the dish machine. And I can't remember if there were other people working with me that day or not, but I really loved, for some reason, that was the most favorite thing I enjoyed doing other than serving breakfast, was the dish machine. And one day I was going crazy on it. I was flying. And Trimurti came by, and he looked at me, and he goes, "Jim, it's okay to exhale. You can take a breath if you want to." And I remember talking to him later, and I said, it's sort of interesting. I know that when you came by and saw me like a wild man, crazy guy going 100 miles an hour, that maybe you thought that God was the furthest thing from my mind. But I said, actually, there was a part of me that was really in communion with God at that time, and I know anybody watching me would not have been able to really pick that up. But and then he got this really shocked look on his face, and he goes, well, thank you for sharing that, because it is true. It's true. Sometimes what we see on the outside, we see somebody flying around, and we draw a logical conclusion, and yet we really don't know a lot of the times what is going on. Is there something going on inside that person on another level? So I've always remembered when, what's the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, right? So I've always sort of remembered that little particular example when I was working at the EL in terms of Trimurti. He didn't, I worked with him so closely for 6 months, and I never really saw him get a shocked look on his face except for that particular moment, and I think personality has a lot to play with it too, because some people, to get back to what Yash was just talking about in terms of some people not being receptive to the message, if our personality is sort of more withdrawn and more contemplative, then that may even lend further that we may not be, so eager to share with others if they're not in the right mood. But when I was back in my born-again Christian days, there was this guy named Mark, who was an Italian guy, just fiery and on love for Jesus, and he didn't care what time of the day or night it was. He was going to share Jesus with whomever was in front of him, and this was Mark. This was his personality. So what you see was what you get with him. You know what I mean? It's all on his sleeve. And so again, I think it comes back to our personalities as well, because some of us who are more reticent, like I am, when I was young, I was very shy, and I wouldn't hardly initiate any conversation, even if people spoke to me. I was that uncomfortable, that sort of closed, and too aware. I was too aware of what they were emitting psychically and what everybody else was emitting psychically in the room and all of that. So I think that has a part to play with it too, is our own inherent personality. If you think of somebody like Master was out there too, you know what I mean? He was, let's go, are you awake and ready? And then people try to imitate the awake and ready chant and they really weren't sort of like master, you know what I mean? So I think we have to be sort of true in our own way as well, to ourselves, to our personalities, to our tendencies, to the cards we've been dealt, the cards we come back with, the cards we play with.
I think
Thank
in
you,
the
Jim. Oh,
I
Yash,
think
you want to add something?
I was just going to say, I think in the dish machine example, you were just in the flow,
Mm-hmm.
and my experience of being in the flow, which I sometimes feel, especially when I dance, is I'm really connected with spirit at that
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. So I did an interesting take to this homework assignment, and it was actually more of a sense of emptying myself and removing what blocks me from God as my actions of how to bring spirituality in. Because if we get all these ideas of how to do things, and just the fact that we have ideas takes up space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying that that thoughts are objects, and that was something I heard Swami Kriyananda say, and that's also why we say, the thoughts that you have in your head manifest the world around you, because they are a physical object in a way, and then they'll take up space and they'll start defining things. And I was listening to more of Matt Kahn, and one of the things that he's talking about is that one of our main challenges to full realization is trying to have understanding. Understanding takes up space, for one thing. Understanding means that you're trying to define things as one way or one truth when there's multiple truths. There's multiple universes happening simultaneously. There's multiple planes of living happening simultaneously. And, I think about I studied the pranic healing, and then I've been studying the path of yoga for a long time. And in pranic healing, some things they just present differently. Like, they work with 12 chakras, we only work with 7, but we really only work with 6. And we just let the crown chakra open on its own once we've gotten everything to the 6th chakra. And there they work on the crown chakra. That's one thing. And here, in yoga, we say don't go there right now. Or just in our yoga path. Other yoga paths do go there. So there's that variation. We say it's not safe. Others just do it without having that question. And we also have the colors defined like a rainbow in the chakras. In pranic healing, they have a whole other array of what the colors are. And the teacher's there, and she's like, yeah, you thought the heart was green, but that's wrong. It's blue. And she was just so, matter of fact, that was not true. This is true. And then I'll be in my class the next day with Ananda, and they're like, the heart chakra is green. Mm-hmm. That's the color of love. And which one? Which one is true? Maybe one, maybe the other. And then when we try to have an understanding and we try to convince others of our understanding, that's when we get the battles, because this one has this understanding. And then what do? We get caught up in our differences. Mm-hmm. And we lose the true path towards connection, which is love. Mm-hmm. But there's this other thing that I realized. So he was saying experiment with not needing to understand. And I realized as I was doing that actually when you try to understand, it's almost like you're going deeper and deeper into the karma of this world and the karmic whirlpools. And if you just let go of trying to understand, I still would ask God to give me the wisdom that I need, give me the lessons from the situation that I need. So I'm not going to be amiss of the knowledge that I need to move forward. But instead of cluttering my mind with thought and going deeper and deeper into the whirlpool and the experience of this thing that I didn't like, or maybe I did like it, but I'm still getting, too caught up in it instead of learning to be more detached. So I just create the space for the intuition to come in. Another layer, or another way to talk about that, is judgment. And, the judgment that we need to be a certain way or not a certain way. Judgment creating discernment between two things. Judgment that one thing is higher or lower. Then you're spending your time classifying, But what you're doing is you're talking about a difference between things, and then you're not able to unite if you're talking about what is separating and dividing. So I spent this time, emptying, and then I had this example of, back at the expanding light. You're talking about karma yoga, and this reminds me of that. But I was doing a little bit of karma yoga on Sunday. I was helping out with the table where we collect money for people coming to lunch. And I left service a little bit early to set up the table so that it's ready when they come out of service, and I'm putting out the plates and putting napkins and forks on them. Very mundane things, so I have plenty of space to think while I'm doing this. And one of the things, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last time we talked or not, but if you hear a baby cry across the room, and you're the mom, and you start walking across the room and you're thinking about the baby crying, but you stub your toe on the way because you weren't actually putting your full presence into each moment. So the baby is crying, and yes, you do want to know why the baby is crying, but you have to get over to the baby first. You need to do that. And if you don't pay attention to each moment of getting over to the baby, that's when we stub the toes. And I did a lot of stubbing of my toes while I was packing. There were lots of things to stub my toes on. And I had to ask myself, that question is, so it's putting your full focus just on the thing that you're doing. So we have all of these elements that I was just mentioning coming together, and here I am, the plates, napkin, fork, plates, napkin, fork, stacking in this nice array, and I'm thinking about all sorts of things that happened in the past at Ananda, my plans in the future, what happened that weekend, the past week, and then I remember, oh yes, thoughts are objects, and I'm blocking the opportunity for intuition to come in. I'm blocking the opportunity for God to guide me in where I need to be and what I need to think about in this moment. And so I just said, okay, clear. And as soon as I did that, a man came over who's a friend of mine, and he said to me, it just occurred to me that I need to introduce you to my mother, who just moved to Portland, because she helps people set up spiritual businesses. And I nearly started crying inside because I knew that was a reaction to me emptying. And I've been watching as I had all these trips to Portland, and I kept asking the question of what to do and learning to just be open-minded, of seeing all these responses and having one step lead into the next and lead into the next. And, having these doors open. Just, kind of as I'm ready or just a little bit beyond where I'm ready, so that it pushes me a little bit. And so I liked creating the space for that. And while I have your ear, I wanted to share a couple other thoughts from this past week, and they go into relating to what I was just saying, as well as some of the passages that are in the section of the Gita that we're looking at. And one thing I've been looking at is, in the Battle of the Mahabharata, we're sort of fighting against certain qualities in ourselves, and we've made a judgment that these things are bad. And I want to shift that around and say, what if the meaning is really that we love ourselves, that everything exists within us, and there is no good and bad definition of anything. There is no necessarily an up or down. There's what takes us to more peace inside and what doesn't. What makes us feel more love and what doesn't might be the question I'm sitting more in now. And what action do I take is just guided by God. And so if the guidance by God is that you don't want these qualities to exist within you and do this to work on them, then we get the battle of the Mahabharata, and this conversation that arises. But I just came to the realization, with thinking about that and this defining good and bad, that actually what we've done, the reason we experience pain, is because we have an ingrained definition of what is good and what is bad within us. And because of that judgment, when something occurs around us or within us that we have judged as bad, we feel pain. So what if we removed that judgment and then we wouldn't feel pain? And then the other thing about pain is that pain is a means of communication to you that something is wrong. And it's only based on the definition that you've created of what's right and what's wrong. You know, I'm still going to decide that I want, if I touch a stovetop, you know, that's on by accident and start burning my hand, I want to feel pain. Because I want a message, because I think it would be a lot easier to fulfill my duties in this world if I can keep my hand. So I want that pain. You know, I want something that gives me a message, and the form the message comes in is physical pain, is what we translate as pain. But if I remove, you know, other judgments of what is good and what is bad, and not attach or just see there's pain there, so I've made a judgment that something is off here. Is there really something I need to shift or not? And just look at it that way, instead of looking at it as like pain, it's bad, I don't know how to deal with it. What is the message here? And how do I detach from this? It's just a message. It's not necessarily that something is going to fall apart. I remember when I was taking Bikram yoga, I had troubles with the winters in the beginning in Ananda village, and I realized Bikram yoga was a nice help. You could get really hot in there, although it's a little more hot than I need. And some friends were going, so that's also why I went. But I used to try to get there early and get a spot under the fan, so it could be just the slightest bit cooler. And by the time we got to the floor exercises, and we're doing these back bends, and our heart is on the ground, I could feel my heart pulsating more and more, and it scared me. It really scared me. I realized, you know, that was the issue, because I started to have to stop doing the back bends at that point, and just sit up and breathe. And I realized there must be something that happened in a past life, and this is a feeling, you know, that I felt that I defined as bad. So I'm just going to keep breathing through it and telling myself there's really nothing wrong here. And I did, and I didn't have issues after a while. You know, it was a slow process. It didn't just all happen like that. But that idea helped, of just saying, you know, nothing really is going to harm me here. It's okay. I mean, it's not that hot. And I'm drinking water. I'm not going to get dehydrated. And even if I get a little dehydrated, I'm not going to die from this amount of dehydration. I'm young. I'm healthy. So that was something to keep in mind. And when we work with things with love, and when we accept it, you know, then it's like through relaxation, we can learn to be with everything that's within us. And if we always keep having the intention that we want to aspire deeper and deeper into God, and finding God within, that God will remove what needs to be removed. A friend of mine approached me one day, and she's like, "Am I edgy? Everyone's telling me that I'm edgy." And she's saying it, you know, kind of in an edgy way. And I just said to her, "Do you feel edgy?" She says, "No." And I said to her, "If you were edgy, would you have any issues with being edgy?" And she says, "No." So I said, if there's an issue with you being edgy, God will remove the edginess over time. You're doing your spiritual practices. Don't worry about it. And I think she's just a slightest bit less edgy now, but I think people really appreciate that in her, because it creates spark and creativity. And it pushes them from places where they might get stuck. So there's a good side to each of these things. It's not necessarily all bad, just because other people don't know how to handle it or work with it. And about needs to change. It's like, let God decide what needs to change. This is more to God, and this is where we need to have less understanding. We can go so freely in life and move and just keep taking one step after another. Matt Kahn, he described this, and I was told that I think it was similar for Swami Kriyananda, that he wouldn't remember often even the beginning of his talk, halfway through it. He didn't remember anything from his past except if it came to him through intuition in the moment. He was a blank slate. And I was thinking about that before I was going in to teach one day, and I realized the reason why I say more or less at different times is because it depends on how open the people are. If they create a blank slate, I can share a lot more. If they have a specific way or direction that things want to go, then I'm going to get blocked by that. And I'm going to have to, dance around that or with it. And I went in there, with this thought, just pray that they be as open as possible. And I shared so many really deep things with them and just got to the heart of the matter for a lot of people. So it felt to be a very beautiful, beautiful experience. We have this analogy at Ananda that, if you're trying to pull a nail out of the wood, you never know how deep the nail is stuck in the wood. So you don't really know when the nail is going to come out. So even if you have an idea of something needs to change, you don't know when it's going to change. You don't know when the nail is going to come out of the wood. God gets to decide. He decides how big the nail is and when the nail is done, when it's out of the wood.
So now...
one more comment. And Swami Kriyananda said that the only way to fail is if you don't try. Okay, what do you want to say, Jim?
No, I was just going to say, so in other words, Yash and I are no longer, we're not only just the peanut gallery, we're also blank slates then, is that right?
Well, the more blank slate you are, the more I can share.
That's what I'm saying, we must be some pretty blank slates tonight. It's called quieting your mind, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Why, Jim, while you're up there, why don't you read 620, 621, and 622? Just read the text for the stanzas.
Okie 620, 21, 22.
And then you'll see the tie-ins for the things I was saying as we go along to some of these passages.
Okie doke. The state of complete inner tranquility, which is attained by yoga meditation, wherein the little self, the ego, perceives itself as the self, enjoys itself as the self, that state in which bliss, transcendent above the senses and accepted as such by intuitive intelligence, can never be expunged, the state which, once attained, is considered the treasure beyond all other treasures. In that state alone does the yogi become immune to grief, even in the face of the greatest tragedy.
Yash, do you want to make any comments on those passages?
Yeah, I think what really jumped out at me was, immune to grief. And also when you were speaking, Avital, I was thinking that just as we really don't want pain to happen, we also want to be happy all the time. And I've just been, at times when, of course we're not so happy all the time, and I've really been trying lately when I'm not feeling that happy to just be perfectly okay with it. And at those moments when I achieve that, then being not happy is fine. We just have this idea, I'm not happy, and you're basically unhappy about being unhappy, and it's all in your, it's all in your mind. Yeah. So when you're able to attain that state of transcending the senses, be in a place of acceptance. Yeah, in a way I haven't achieved that yet, but I can imagine that you would be immune to grief, even in the greatest tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you could even say we've made a judgment that happy is good and sad is bad.
Yes, exactly.
See, I
And
think that
it's
they're
really,
all... Oh, go ahead.
we're really wired that way. So it does take work
Mhm.
to get past that,
Yeah.
and to remember that it's okay not to be happy, or even okay to be scared or be in pain.
Hmm.
The more intense the negative association is with or the more intensely you're feeling the feeling that you think is negative, the more difficult it is to remember that it's okay, in my experience.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think really that happy and sad are two ends of the spectrum of duality. And duality means you're still caught up in this plane. And when you're in the center point, when you're in the center of the spine, you're not in duality. There's no happy and there's no sad. Maybe there's just peace or love. I don't know yet what's in there. All I know is that I get calmer and I get more loving the more time passes, the more I keep working on all of this. And maybe that's more like being in the center point in the spine. Um, what did I hear? Oh, one of the other things that they're trying to make a point of is that there's sort of a passage, there's steps that people go through to get to that realization, and these are the feelings. These are the places that you are when you get there. And it was so sweet. I think I had written this as a note, and then on my birthday, there's this man that I visited. Not on my birthday, but a year and a half ago in India, there's a man that I visited who claims to be enlightened. And I definitely felt a greatness in his presence. I can't validate whether or not he feels enlightened, but he had sent me a birthday note, which I just thought was really special. That he's, I don't know, keeping a conscious wrapping of his aura around me and sending me energy and thinking about me. There might be other swamis or great leaders. They just do that from a distance, but they don't connect with you or say happy birthday to you. They don't pay attention to those special moments of your life. And but what he described, why I'm bringing him up, is really just to say what he described, whether or not he is enlightened or realized, or at what level of that he's enlightened, is that he would hit certain times where he would feel this great sense of peace for a few hours or a few days, and then it would go away. And so he just saw that as a pattern. But one time, it stayed. And it stayed since then. And that's like when you get there, when there's nothing at all, that can pull you from that state and that place. Yogananda says you must be able to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And this is really this idea of circumstances are neutral, finding the strength within us of center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And as Swami used to warn us of this tragedy that's coming, Yogananda warned us as well. We haven't seen it yet. But one of the things that Swami would say is, you can think of your biggest fear and what is the worst that could happen, and then how would you deal with it? And that helps wipe away the fear, because you've then figured out that you can handle the fear. And I don't necessarily know if this is a big fear of mine, because I don't know what it would be like for me when this tragedy comes, or how I would interact with it. But I would think about this a lot. First, I was a fitness director at YMCA, and it had over 12,000 members. It was a huge facility. It had call buttons in certain places, like emergency buttons. It was also a hospital, so that's why it had the emergency buttons. But some parts of it were so distant from where they could be in touch with anyone in this big building that it was helpful to have these call buttons. And then they had a whole I've never seen such an extensive evacuation system, an emergency system of any place, with these maps, the codes, the colors, and bags of this color for this person, and they had directors on duty, and then like an assistant director on duty every single hour of the day. And so they just had all of the different directors of the YMCA rotate around between being the director on duty. So I was one of them. And I just always imagined myself in the situation, in the moment of this tragedy happening, and how would I handle it? What would I do? And it becomes something different, because all I would think about is, okay, yeah, I mean, you have to be logical. You have to tell this person go there, this person go there. But the most important thing that I always think about in those situations is if we can feel love. If we can go into that space instead of fear, and feel that inside us no matter what is happening. And that if I can send them that, and if I can do something to help them think about love, singing a song that they relate to, whatever it might be, that helps us overcome that true tragedy. It's this finding the calmness within. Any of you want to say anything? Yash, you want to read 623?
Sure. That state is known as yoga, the condition in which one becomes immune to any pain. The practice of yoga should therefore be followed resolutely with undaunted feeling.
So here I was talking about pain earlier. One becomes immune to any pain, and so some of the thoughts that I offered earlier were gearing you up for this passage. And it says, that this state of ultimate union with God is the condition in which one becomes immune to any pain. And the first state, Sabhikalpa Samadhi. After that, it's Nirvikalpa Samadhi. They have this thing here of saying, there's some ego consciousness present. They try to make this statement about how for a guru, for an avatar to come back into this world that has reached the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and if they're going to take on a body, they have to have some form of ego in order to do so. And so I think that's even part of why they live out some of the human experience because of that.
Yeah, this sort of reminds me of Ramana Maharshi. When he got enlightened at age 16, soon after that he went to Arunachala, and when he first got there, he spent some time in different locations. Like I think he first spent time at a temple in the town, and then he some boys, neighborhood boys, started throwing rocks at him because he was in such a blissful, he was just gone. He was in some type of samadhi. I don't know what type it was, but he was not even aware of his surroundings. And so, boys will be boys, and so they started throwing rocks at this guy to see if they could get a reaction. And then the rats would come, and bite on him, and all of this pain that he was experiencing on the physical level, and yet he wasn't really aware of it. And other people had to come to attend to his wounds, from the rats, from the rocks, from no food. And it's amazing how I've heard other similar accounts of other saints who have had this type of experience where they just seem to lose all sense of their physical surroundings and their physical body, and other people have to take care of them, or they literally wouldn't have enough food or water to live. Yeah. They'd be gone. Yeah,
so. Like an Ananda Moyima, they would force her to eat.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the story. I think it's Ramana Maharshi, maybe it's someone else, but it was like his guru wanted him to even detach from being dependent on the form of Divine Mother, and he refused. Like he was still attached to having Divine Mother. But then
Oh
when
yeah,
he
yeah.
realized that, so he had to cut it, and I think the guru like cut him at the spiritual eye, first with a piece of glass to help him
Yeah.
overcome that. And then he took the glass and cut Divine Mother. I might be saying the story wrong, but that's the idea, that
No.
even Divine Mother, even that form,
Right.
we have to lose our attachment to these spiritual forms that we've created.
Yeah, I don't know if you were specifically referring to Papaji there, but again, these are almost archetypal in terms of their occurrence, and the details may change from one saint to another. But in terms of Papaji, he was too attached to the form of Krishna, because when Papaji was a little boy, Krishna came and visited him. And he had a great love for Krishna ever since he was like 5, 6, 7 years old. And he went to see Ramana Maharshi when he was in his 30s or 40s. And he had to go through that process of finally destroying the form of Krishna.
Yeah.
So you're thinking of someone else, because there was that one story where the guy stuck the piece of glass in the third eye, and he said, "This is where you need to think, or this is where you need to put your attention to."
Yeah.
And I don't know if he got enlightened at that point, but these are so archetypal. You just see one, and you think of this one over there, and then you think of that one over there, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, why don't you read 624 and 625?
Okay. Relinquishing without exception every self-willed longing, restraining mentally all sensory involvement in the world, patiently calming the intuitive intelligence and absorbed in the self, the yogi, relinquishing all other thoughts, gradually attains perfect peace.
I think this relates to what I was saying about even having understanding, that that's a sensory involvement in the world, and that thoughts are objects, and they take up space, they create blockages from being in that perfect state of peace.
And reality is beyond mind. Reality is beyond thought. So this is where we struggle. Our ego comes in and says, well, wait a minute, I'm not thinking enough. I need to think more this way, or I need to accept this view over here, or I need to maybe go down this path here. But it's all thought. Reality is beyond thought. And this is until we get that, until that really pierces us, we're still going to be looking for the next doctrine or the next philosophy or the next, like you said, it's duality. And if it's not left, we're going to go right. If it's not up, we're going to go down. So we're going to find some way, our mind, our ego, try to wrestle with it on a rational level, and it's beyond mind. And so, this is where the surrender needs to come in. And like you were talking about earlier, is when you're able to get into a place of surrender, to allow that intuitiveness to come to you, then the answer comes. But if you're sitting there and your mind is monkey mind's going around, the squirrel cage 50 million times, it's only when you stop that squirrels from running around, and then you open yourself up and say, what God do you want me to learn here? Then that's when you have the experience of the divine intuition and intelligence. You're creating a channel. You're opening up a channel for that to come through.
Yeah. So, Swami Kriyananda, he said towards the end of his life that he didn't pray with words anymore. There's just, words limit us because they don't touch everything. There's this passage here that I wanted to read, which sounds really nice. The patience counseled in the last stanza is necessary for calming the mind. Paramhansa Yogananda likened it to a glass of water into which dirt particles have been stirred. One cannot command the water to become clear. But if one allows the glass to sit for a while, the impurities gradually settle to the bottom, or else rise to the surface of their own accord to be skimmed off. And this is actually an important thing to understand, too, that the longer meditations are very helpful. If meditation is part of your path, that when we sit for shorter meditations, it's like a little bit of the dirt gets still. But the longer we sit, the more the dirt separates itself from the water, and the more space we can open up to let those come in. I was surprised, Yash, when they said, what is it, meditations are only, 45 minutes or however long they were, and it was just like you constantly had the meditation stopped. And that might be good for people who are just beginning to do that, because if they go too long, they're going to get agitated and then not be able to continue. But for people who are ready to go deeper, you don't want to stop that possibility of continuing to go deeper, because you'll find more, and if you do any longer meditations that you can get calmer and calmer. Then if you reach that point where you start getting agitated, then you know your meditation's done. Yash, why don't you read 626 through 630?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that the trick is learning how to stop stirring the glass of water, because we're always stirring it up.
So what do you do to stop stirring?
Well, something that I've been working with lately is the idea that when thoughts come, learning not to grasp at them and hold on to them by also not resisting them. And that's really been working for me as a meditation technique, when rather than resisting thoughts, I don't resist them. I know they're going to come, and I don't worry about it. But by not resisting them, it also makes it more likely that they're going to just pass through quickly on their own and disappear. And I find that after 20, 30, 40 minutes of that, they just stop altogether, and I get into a really, really deep, thoughtless meditation.
Yeah.
So I know I just have to learn to apply that in all parts of my life and not just meditation.
Yeah.
Working on it.
Work in progress.
Yep. 626. Each time the fickle, wavering mind wanders from its course, let him withdraw it and redirect it toward the task of bringing it under control. The yogi who has completely calmed his mind, whose passions, raguna, are at rest, and who is freed from every impurity, truly attains oneness with the spirit and supreme blessedness. The yogi, freed from imperfections, ceaselessly engaged in activities that lead to divine union, easily attains the state of blissful union with spirit. United to the Supreme Self by the practice of yoga, he beholds himself in all beings, and that oneself. He who beholds me everywhere and who beholds everything in me never loses sight of me, nor do I lose sight of him.
I mainly wanted to get to this point in the passages today so we could read that last passage. Would you read 630 again?
He who beholds me everywhere and who beholds everything in me never loses sight of me, nor do I lose sight of him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So that was the other thing I was seeing, is that we take God into everything, and no, it's just so beautiful. Every little thing, every little bit of life, every person, everything around you is God. And here I was moving and unpacking all my things, and there's so many things, and at each moment was God. Each thing, the paper that I'm wrapping with, object that I'm wrapping, it's all God. I'm caring for it like a baby. And last night I was taking. Yeah, I only just got back last night. So last night, after this drive all day, I'm taking in the I don't always know where I am, Jim. When I got there.
Just a blank state.
You're in such bliss. You don't even know.
I'm taking in my little statues that I got. I got a St. Francis and a Mary, and I'm carrying like they're babies, and I know that this is really just a this stone object, and it was carved out in this form, and we've defined this form as a godly thing. Um, but it doesn't have to be that way. But I was just applying that energy to it, and it was regardless of what face was painted on this statue. It could be God or not be God, depending on what energy that I applied to it, and it was just sweet. I mean, and it's heavy, and I have to go through these doors. It's a little awkward. I mean, I kept praying like some knight in shining armor would show up as I was doing this, and nobody did. So I had to take it all up myself, and so I just sat in the joy of, okay, I'm doing that, and I'll just treat it like my baby and pray that I can make it without dropping my statue. Wouldn't it be funny if I cut Mary's head off? Oh, and here's the, I put this on Facebook earlier. What seems to hold the Lord at a distance is only our indifference. And there is a quote from How to Achieve Glowing Health and Vitality, which says, the greatest enemy of yourself is yourself. We are the ones who block God. There is a story that the minister Yogananda told at Sunday service, and let's see if I can briefly summarize the story. But this guru is having his disciple study with him, and he's a young guy, and he says, I'd really like to go out in the world and experience, love and getting married, and so the guru says, oh, okay, you go do that. And then 10 years later, he goes and he finds the man, and the man, he had all this love, and then maybe he's already started to have a couple kids, and the guru says, okay, let's go. You come back with me to the ashram, and the man says, no, that wouldn't be right for me to just leave my wife and the kids. I need to be here to take care of them. Please, give me 10 more years until I get a little older. And the guru says, okay. And so he leaves, and he comes back 10 years later, and then there he is, and the kids are, older, and he's just, a little bit older, and he says, to the man, okay, ready, let's go. And the man says, no, my kids, like, I need to be here to help them get married off, and and go off into the world, and just give me a little more time, give me another 10 years. And the guru's, okay. So he comes back 10 years later, and I'm just going to skip one of the steps here, and he's looking around, and there's a pit bull in front of the house, and it's guarding the house. And then he realizes that the pit bull was the man, and the man had died, but he was so obsessed with protecting his family that he came back as a pit bull so he could protect the family. And so he says to him, come with me. And the pit bull says, no, I need to be here to protect the family. They're having the grandkids, and let me be here until they get a little older and they're a little safer. And the guru's, okay. 10 years later, he comes back, and there's no pit bull in front. And he's looking around, and he uses his intuition, and he finds right by the family safe a snake coiled up. And so he realizes, the snake is him, and he tells one of the grandkids to go and hit the snake on its back. And he says, he promises the snake will not do anything to you, and then once you hit it on the back, bring me the snake. And so the kid does that, hits it on the back, brings him the snake, and the guru takes the snake, puts him over his shoulder, and walks away with the snake.
Wow. Very cool.
It's a nice thing that, God keeps coming back and keeps coming back. At a certain point, he's just got to force it to happen. I mean, the man was just completely getting degraded to these lower and lower forms, and he was still obsessed, and then he had nothing left that could resist the guru.
Very cool.
Sweet. Yeah, very sweet story. So, for the homework, I thought we would work on this practice of emptying. Emptying of understanding, emptying of judgment, emptying of thoughts to the best we can, and the first steps of doing that is just setting the intention. And then you ask the question, God, what is the intuition that you want to fill me up with? What is the space that you want to fill me up with? So we can live our lives in a space of creation rather than processing.
Blank slate.
Blank slate. Wouldn't that be fun? It's so much fun. You have to try it.
Maybe I've done it too much.
It's so easy, and it's so relaxing and calming. So I highly recommend it. And then see what comes to you when you do that.
Right on. Total whiteboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Avital, you said empty ourselves of judgments, what, and other thoughts?
Oh, well, I specifically said judgments, understanding, and thoughts.
Understanding, yes, that's a critical one. We want understanding.
Yeah. No. See what it's like not to need understanding.
Blank slate.
Yeah. So I will see you guys next week, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Next week we'll probably still be on Google Hangout. I have no idea where I'm going to be next week. No, I'm not kidding.
What else is new?
I don't know where I'm going to be. All the other times I've known. But I have to figure out where I'm going to be. And it's probably not here. And we'll just be on Google Hangout. And then during the week, I'll probably prepare the new webinar program, and then we can test that the following week.
How was your last Tuesday in Encinitas? How'd that go?
Oh, I just ended up staying late with the students that were there. And and did yoga postures with them.
Cool.
Yeah, instead of doing the Gita. So that was the flow that was happening. It was a class on asanas. It worked.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. All right, guys. Blessings. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Yash. Adios.
Adios. Ciao.